to the Decahedron RPG podcast, hosted by Joe. Welcome to the Decahedron RPG podcast. Enjoy the show.
Hi, friends. This is episode number 125 of the Decahedron RPG podcast. I am calling this one Legend of the Flying Fish and the Jade Dragon. So this is kind of a continuation from last week's show. Last week, I talked about an idea I had for a campaign. I'm not going to go into the whole thing. Short story is a bunch of people riding in a sea boat in pre-World War II South China Sea. If you want to know more, listen to episode 124. At the end of that episode, I said, for a game system, I think I would use Traveler, but I would tweak some things. Now, I got some feedback that recommended some other games, and that's great. Thanks. I will play that in another episode. But by that time, my wheels had already been turning, and, I sat down with the Traveler rules to try to put something together, like what skills would I use, what do I need to change. And I have joked about it before, saying that I am a frustrated game designer. So what I ended up doing, of course, is making my own game. Of course, saying that it's all my own is a little over the top because standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Heavy inspiration with Traveler, Tunnels and Trolls, maybe even a little Monopoly. Fudge snuck its way in there, and cinema realism versus real realism, which is a concept I first read about in GURPS, believe it or not, because I find that hard to believe because, GURPS is really all about realism. But there was a couple, actually, I guess it was in GURPS Space, where they said you could have another skill just called science with like an exclamation point, and explained how that would be a cinematic skill. And I was like, wow, I like that idea. And I lean that way these days, but not just for the science skill, but for like everything. We'll talk about skills in a minute. This is actually the second time I'm recording this show. The first time, it went really long, and I was like, I really gave far too much detail, and I did it in a weird order. So I'm going to go the other way and do it again. The game has a core mechanic. I know some people don't like those. I do. I made the game, so it has one. It's inspired by Traveler's Rule 68A and by Tunnels and Trolls. Hey, Joe, I've read Traveler. I don't recall Rule 68A. That's because Rule 68A isn't an actual Traveler rule. It is a fan rule. And really, what they did... Okay, a little background. Classic Traveler doesn't have a core system. For every skill, they would say, roll this for that, and this other skill, you want to roll that, and stuff like that. But when it came to combat, it was roll 2 dice, add your skill, you need to get 8. Fans just took that and made that into a core mechanic. And they call it Rule 68A because what they did is, okay, so for your average skill, you want to roll that 8. Just like you do in combat. If it's an easy skill, you only need to roll 6. And if it's a hard skill, you need to roll 10, which in Traveler they call A. So Rule 68A. If we're going to go in that way, this would be Rule 8.2-2. So all I'm doing is saying roll 2d6, add your skill, and then add a circumstance bonus or penalty. So following the Rule 68A concept, if it's a hard check, you get a -2. If it's an easy check, you get a +2. If instead it's a contested skill, you're rolling against an NPC or something, you're using their skill level as your modifier as a penalty. So if they have a skill level of 2, you get a -2. Because in this game, like my Shirts and Skirts game was, it's all player facing. The player rolls all the dice. I've done that in my designs for a while now. In fact, I heard a review on the Nerds RPG Variety Cast, not a review, an interview with the guy who developed the one-shot RPG and how he talked about making his rolls out in the open. So the players know that he's not fudging them and that their successes are really their successes. Yeah, I think player-facing games are the next step beyond that. They know I'm not cheating because I'm not rolling anything. So it's all the players. I don't need a screen, well, to hide my notes, but I never roll the dice. So you say, okay, Joe, so that sounds like Traveler. I thought you said TNT comes into play. It does, because just like Tunnels and Trolls saving rolls, I'm saying if you roll doubles, add it and roll over. So, you roll boxcars at 12, you get to roll again. The pause there was because I was thinking, well, you roll a 12, you already succeeded, but you might be going for that crit. So yeah, roll again. So I just said it. So the crit. So how do you get a crit? I like crits. I like fumbles. I know some people don't. I do. I think the frequency, though, comes into play. And I think, the 5% that they happen in D&D is a little too much. So I kind of cut that in half. Well, I did the math. I calculated all the rolls, and it came out pretty funny to say that if you roll a 20 or higher, it's almost exactly where I want the number to be, which is about 2%. So if the dice get exactly a 20, not exactly, sorry. If the dice get, without your skill, get at least a 20 or higher, that's a crit, and you get the crit results. I have an alternate way of doing it where you get to add your skill, but then you need a 23 or higher. But I think I'm going to make that an alternate rule, and the actual official rule is 20 or higher because natural 20 is ingrained in people's heads from the D20 games. Okay, so that's how you get a crit. How do you get a fumble? This is where Monopoly comes into play. So you're rolling, you roll that double, you get to pick up the dice, you roll a double again, you get to go again. So say you're going for that crit, right? And you roll an 8 the first time, so 2 4s. You roll the second time, you roll 2 5s for a 10. Now you're 18. You need to pick up the dice and roll again. And really, you only need 2 in this circumstance. But if you roll 2, that would be snake eyes. That's a double. 3 doubles, that's a fumble, even though you would have succeeded based on the number. And the reason I think this will work, won't know until I go to the table, of course, is because I think it gives you a nice tension when you're rolling doubles, right? You're rolling your skill check, you get doubles, and you get in this little high, right? A little dice high. You're like, oh, am I going to get a crit? And you roll again, and you get doubles, and now you're going to be nervous. It's like, oh, no. Am I going to roll doubles again? And what I thought was going to be a great success is now a fumble. I think that would be fun. I think that would be interesting. Again, though, won't know until we get it to play. So that's the core mechanic. Again, roll 2d6 plus your skill, 8 or higher, and you succeed. You get a 20-ish, and that's a crit. Doubles add rollover, and you get 3 doubles in a row. That is a fumble. Okay, I talked about skills. As you probably got from the context, the skills go from like 0 to +3-ish, which is a very Traveler-esque range. I will say, though, that I also have a skill level for -1 for skills that you're inept at, your weaknesses, if you will. So your skill might be a -1, depending on how you made your character. So let me just go through the skill list really quick. I'm going to say its name and what it does. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I made a lot of names very colorful so that they would match the setting. But they're in 4 groups and they're very broad skills. So, like in GURPS, you have brawling, and then you have boxing, and then you have judo, and then you have karate. And then you have longsword, and broadsword is a separate skill, and spear is a separate skill. That's 8 that I mentioned right there. And of course, there's a lot more. I just have one. It's called fighter to cover all that. Because when you look at the fiction, when you look at Indiana Jones, when you look at Captain Kirk in the Gamesters of Triskelion, he's on this alien planet. They make him fight in the arena, and he picks up this alien polearm that he's never seen before, but he still won because he's a fighter, and fighters know how to use what they have, and B, because he's the hero of the story. Of course, he's going to win. So I think having separate weapon skills for each weapon, that goes against that. So again, very broad skills. The 4 categories of skill. The first category is aircrew skills. These are the skills you need to fly the plane. The plane in question is the PBY-5A Catalina. It's an actual plane from the period. Actually, it's from a few years after I'm setting it, but fun over realism. Yeah, so the positions on the plane are pilot, co-pilot, navigator, mechanic, bow gunner, and 2 waist gunners. So that's 8. Oh, and radio man. Did I say that one? So that's 8 crew members. But there's really only 5 skills there, right? Because pilot and co-pilot are the same skill, and the 3 gunners are all the same skill. So gunner, mechanic, navigator, pilot, radio man. Those are the 5 aircrew skills. I think they're all fairly self-explanatory. You'll also notice that all my skills are named after a person who does that skill, not the skill itself. Again, just a flavor decision. Combat skills, only have 2 of them. Fighter, which is all your hand-to-hand stuff, and sharpshooter, that's all your bang-bang stuff. The biggest category are the general skills, and they are athlete, that's your running, jumping, swimming, all that fun stuff. Bookworm, that's your general knowledge role, to know something. Bookworm. City Slicker, that's your streetwise skill. Daredevils, that is like a swashbuckling skill or a acrobatic skill. Lookout is your perception or your observation skill. Medic is what I would normally call first aid. Reveler, Reveler is carousing, the skill of partying, the skill of vices. Some game put it as once that I liked. It's the ability to gamble, to drink, to seduce, to party, to be the life of the party, all that stuff. Scallywag. So Scallywag is your ne'er-do-well skills, if you will. Lockpicking, picking pockets, forgery, safe cracking, cheating at gambling. So whereas gambling would be a reveler, cheating would be scallywag. When I'm thinking about this skill, I am thinking about Newkirk on Hogan's Heroes, who wasn't a thief, but he knew all these thiefy type things. But that brings in another thing, though, is like both reveler and scallywag would probably both have like a gambling ability. So yeah, that's fine. I don't view that as a bug. I view that as a feature. So when you say, all right, you're sitting around the gambling table, roll your reveler skill, be prepared for the player to come back and say, well, can I use scallywag instead? Say, oh, by all means, yeah, do that if that's higher. Next skill is spook, and that's your general stealth, move silently, hiding shadows, all that stuff. Wheelman is your stunt driving skill. I call it stunt driving, not driving, because I think if you call a skill driving, someone is tempted to say, some GM out there is tempted to say, oh, you have to drive to the port, make a driving roll. That is no. By calling it stunt driving, that should make it clear that you only use it in things like car chases or driving too fast on a winding mountain road in the rain or something like that. When you're trying to do something dramatic and it's not for everyday use. Of course, that applies to all skills, but Smooth talker, that is your generic diplomacy skill. Fast talker, things like that. And trailblazer, that's the wilderness survival skill. Then the last skill group is called other. And that is really just a wide open-ended thing. Anything the player wants to say, maybe he wants to say he was a farm boy growing up and he can think of a way to make that useful during gameplay. By all means, use that skill. Yeah, it's just wide open. There's no list to pick from. Adds depth and color to the character. In the book that I'm writing, I'm toying with the idea of putting this on like drive-through as a, freebie, pay what you want type thing. I talked about color, right? I'm using color throughout all these things. I said, the way I named the skills and all that stuff. Their descriptions are a little colorful, and I'm going to do one for you. This is the gunner skill, and this is how it is written up in my notes right now. Gunner. Aw, geez. Pointing a pea shooter and yanking a lever? That's kid stuff. Some chucklehead does that and he'll miss the barn door from 10 paces. He'll waste more ammo than a drunken sailor on shore leave, and he'll leave the barrels hotter than a $2 pistol. Not me. I got the lead in my gut. I feel the target speed in my bones. I know when to unleash hellfire, and I know when to let the old iron cool its temper. This ain't thinking, this is a song my body sings. And if that song gets a bad note, if there's a jam or a stubborn bolt, I got the moves to fix it faster than you can say Mayday. No, sir, I ain't no greenhorn. I'm a gunner, and these skies are my domain. Sorry about the voice there. It just matched what I saw for the character. It's a little embarrassing, but I'm going to leave it in there. Besides the skills, I do have saves because you'll notice I never said anything about attributes. There are no attributes in this game. Earlier when I said there was a touch of fudge in there, that's where that comes from. In fudge, Stephen O'Sullivan made this point that when you link attributes to skills, you end up with these weird situations. Let me give you an example from GURPS. In GURPS, all your skills have a default value, and the default is usually the overriding attribute -3. So if you want to be a good sniper, you're going to give yourself a high dex to be able to, do those long distance shots and everything. That means when you look in the book, because you have this high dex, let's say you gave yourself a dex of 15. When you look at the book, the skill, like probably ballet dancer, is probably dex -3. So that would mean that because you made a sniper, you can automatically say that you can ballet dance at a skill of 12, which is a professional level skill. And that's just silly in my mind. So in Fudge, Stefan said, break them apart. Attributes are one thing, skills are another. I took that a step further and said, well, if that's the case, what do these attributes do? They don't really do anything. All of them can be replaced by skills. And that's why the athlete skill is there. That kind of replaced strength and a little bit of dexterity and stuff like that. So I don't have any attributes, but there were still 2 cases where I needed something. And so I called those saves or save and throws. And I have 2 of them. One is brass. I call it brass again. It's the color, trying to feel like the time period. Brass is your mental stamina. It's your willpower, your ability to resist temptations, your ability to stay awake on a long guard duty shift, stuff like that. In the D20 system, this would be your will save. The next one I have is toughness, which, again, in the D20 system, this would be your fortitude save. This is your physical endurance. This is your overall well-being. This is, I was bitten by a cobra. Can I survive the poison? Make a toughness save. Now you're going to say, hey, Joe, wait, D20 had a 3rd save, which was reflex. Yeah, it did. And originally I had a 3rd save here, and it was called quickness. But then in my write-up for it, I said, if you have the daredevil skill, you can substitute that for the quickness save. And as I thought about it, I was like, but then during character creation, it is never to your benefit to take quickness over daredevil. So I just did away with the save and say, choose daredevil. For anything where you would normally ask for a reflex type save, ask for a daredevil check. All right, those are all the skills and the saves. Character creation, real quick. I just said, skill levels go from 1 through 3. They could go higher, but if you're doing one shot, right, you'll never get the experience points to do it. All you do is you pick your 3 best skills. Say, pilot, sharpshooter, city slicker. And then you just assign them, 1, 2, 3. And so say I want to be pilot 3, sharpshooter 2, city slicker +1. And one of those 3 skills has to be an aircrew skill. Oh, by the way, I was saying before that there's 8 crew members. So what I would probably do when I'm playing this is have each player play 2, maybe 3, depending on how many players there are, characters, rather than having the rest run by NPCs. And yeah, that's what I would do. The other thing you have to do is you have to pick 3 bad skills. And all of these skills are just going to be at -1. So you have 3 good ones, 3 bad ones. That's 6 skills. There are about 20 on the list. Well, my goal in having a short list was that there are no dump stats, if you will, no skills where taking that -1, I don't care, right? It should hurt a little bit, and that was my goal. Then you get the other skill at level 1, whatever you want it to be, just pick it. Everything else that we haven't mentioned, you'll do at level 0. So next thing, combat, I'm going to talk about. Again, it's all player facing. So let's say you're in a fight with two other people, fist fight, just to make it easy. You're in a fist fight with two other people. You will make an attack roll versus your target's Daredevil skill, right? And so I said they don't roll. All you do is say they have a Daredevil of 1, so you get a -1. They have a Daredevil of 2, you get a -2, whatever. Yeah. So you make your attack roll, you get an 8 or higher, you make your hit. You don't make your hit. Then because there's two of them, you have to make 2 defense rolls. And your defense roll is your I lied. Fighting, they wouldn't roll Daredevil, they would roll their fighter skill. And likewise, yeah. So for fighter, you defend with fighter. For distance combat, it's sharpshooter versus Daredevil. That's where Daredevil fit into play. Armor, we're not using armor. When did you ever see Indiana Jones strap on armor? It's not part of the genre. It's not part of the history. It's not part of the fictional reality that we're trying to emulate. So we're not worrying about armor. Weapons, we don't really care about them in a stat point of view. If they have a sword versus a gun versus a fist, we don't care. And likewise for you, we don't care in terms of like damage or something, because you start with 3 lives, just like I said for shirts and skirts. So if you lose a round, you lose a life. That means you took enough damage that would take the average person out, but you're a hero, so you get 3 of them, right? Most of the NPCs, we're not even going to count. You hit them, they're out. Again, that matches the fiction. So we're not worrying about damage. However, if, say, you're fighting a dude and you have no weapons at all, you're fighting with your fists, and they have a sword, I don't know, maybe the Jade Dragon clan sent a ninja after you. That sounds kind of cool. And so you're fighting them. I would say that you don't have a chance of scoring a hit through that blade, right? They're going to have a katana. So what you need to do then is try to figure out a way to even the odds. Try to pick up something as an improvised weapon, or try to figure out a way to disarm them, stuff like that. And we're going to talk more about that in a second. But that's where weapons come into play. In terms of numbers, nope, don't care. Aerial combat, just like we kind of said before. Your defense roll is your piloting skill. The attack rolls, 1 for each gunner. And stunts. I have here saying use stunts, and I kind of hinted at it a second ago. Stunts are like a helper action. A stunt isn't something that you're trying to accomplish in itself. So let's go back to the fighting example. If you need to get that katana away, that's when you use a stunt. And say, I'm going to try to grab his fist. Okay, that's your fighting roll for that time. And then once I could see Indiana Jones doing that, grabbing the fist and then trying to take the sword away. Or you could say, I'm going to hide behind this tree or this wooden pole and hope that his sword will get stuck when he tries to hit me. And in that case, a success, I would say, yes, and that works, and that's good. You've disarmed him. You can also use a stunt to help somebody else. Maybe you're going to distract the ninja while your buddy tries to disarm him. And so whatever you do, if you succeed at your roll, the other person gets a +2 on their roll. Or if you fail your roll, they get a -1. Of course, you can use stunts to help yourself too. But you have to describe this stunt and say what it's doing. The last thing I have written down is chases. And chases are, let's say it's a car chase, right? You're pretty much going to make your driving check. Maybe if there's other players in the car, they'll make their shooting checks to try to shoot the enemy cars that are chasing you. And pretty much I give the chase itself a number of lives. And so if the chase if you make enough successes to kill the chase itself, not the chaser or the chase, right? Then you get away or you catch up to them if you're the chaser. Yeah, I talked about all that super fast because some things work out better in writing than they do on paper. So thanks for listening. That is the game system for what I am now calling the Legend of the Flying Fish and the Jade Dragon. I think that name invokes the feeling of it. It has a mythic feel to it. It sounds pulpy, yet you can immediately figure out that the flying fish is the flying boat that the players fly. And the Jade Dragon, of course, is the Jade Dragon clan. FFJD is what I call it for short. That's it. I know I rushed. I know I spoke quickly. This was all the second time I recorded this. First time took 45 minutes, so I'm kind of happy with this. Thanks for listening. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you like and what you don't like. I expect that there's always stuff that you like and don't like, and it's helpful to know both. But we're going to talk about that a little more next week when I answer feedback and James asked some questions about what I said last week. So again, thanks for listening. Do send feedback at decahedron.com. Other methods are in the show notes, and they're at www.decahedron.com. Thanks for listening, and until next week, happy gaming, happy life. Bye.
Thanks for listening to